All right, everyone, welcome back. Today, we're taking a deep dive into something that, let's be honest, can be a real pain. HOA problems.
Yeah, those HOAs, am I right?
You know it. Specifically, we're digging into a listener question about what seems like a totally unfair rule being enforced, a fence dispute, actually.
Fences and HOA is a classic combo. Always seems to stir up trouble.
It really does. Our listener wants to know their rights, and thankfully, we're in California, which means we've got the Davis-Stirling Act on our side.
Ah, the Davis-Stirling Act. A bit of a mouthful, but a lifesaver when dealing with these situations.
Definitely a mouthful. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, can you give us a quick overview of what the Davis-Stirling Act is all about? For those who aren't fluent in legalese.
Absolutely. The Davis-Stirling Act is basically like the rule book for HOAs in California. It dictates how they can operate, what they can and can't do.
Okay, so it keeps them in check.
Exactly. It's there to protect homeowners, like our listener, from, well, let's just say from HOAs that might be a little too power hungry.
Yeah.
It's all about fairness and making sure things run smoothly or as smoothly as they can when it comes to HOAs.
Right, because we all know how those HOA meetings can go sometimes.
Oh, tell me about it.
So our listener specifically mentioned this fence issue. They're facing pushback from their HOA, even though it seems like other houses in the community have similar setups, which of course feels super unfair. How does the Davis-Stirling Act actually protect homeowners in a case like this?
That's where things get interesting. The Act gives us some really important tools to challenge unfair treatment. And those tools are three little words that strike fear into the heart of every overzealous HOA board member.
Oh, this is getting good. Hit me with it.
Oh.
What are the magic words?
Right, here they are. Arbitrary, capricious, and selective.
Okay, those sound a little intense. Can you break those down for us?
Of course. Let's start with arbitrary. Basically, it means an HOA is making decisions all willy-nilly without any real logic or consistent reasoning. Think of it like this. Let's say your HOA decides to enforce a rule against, I don't know, brightly colored doors.
Bold move.
Right. But here's the kicker. They only enforce it on houses with, say, south-facing front yards. There's no connection. It's totally random and, well, arbitrary.
So it's not even about the rule itself. It's about how they're applying it. That makes sense. Okay, what about capricious?
Capricious is all about inconsistency. You know, like that friend who changes their mind more often than they change their clothes?
We all know that friend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So imagine your HOA has this rule about landscaping, but what they consider acceptable seems to change every other week. One minute it's all about native plants, the next it's perfectly manicured lawns. That unpredictability is what makes it capricious, a real headache for homeowners just trying to follow the rule.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
And I feel like selective is pretty self-explanatory.
Right. It's exactly what it sounds like, singling out certain homeowners while giving others a free pass. And this is where your fence situation comes in. If your HOA is coming down hard on you for a fence that other neighbors have without any issues, that could definitely fall under selective enforcement.
So in our listener's case, documenting those other fences would be key.
Exactly. Pictures, dates, times, anything that proves this rule isn't being applied fairly across the board. This kind of selective enforcement is a huge red flag, and it's something the Davis-Stirling Act can help you fight back against.
This is so helpful. Okay, so the Davis-Stirling Act defines what's unfair, but what happens if an HOA isn't playing by the rules? Are there actual consequences?
Absolutely. If an HOA is found to be acting arbitrarily, capriciously, or selectively, like trying to enforce that fence rule only on you, they could face some serious legal challenges.
Oh, wow. So it's not just empty threats.
Nope, not at all. They could even be forced to back down, reverse their decision, and compensate homeowners for any damages or losses incurred. Courts take this stuff very seriously. They want to see fairness and consistency, just like the Davis-Stirling Act intends.
So it's always a good idea to have that act memorized or at least bookmarked.
Absolutely. Or, just tune into this deep dive and we'll break it down for you.
There you go. So for our listener who's dealing with this fence fiasco, what would you recommend as a first step?
Documentation is key. I know it sounds tedious, but start keeping a detailed record of everything.
No.
Dates, times of any interactions with the HOA, the exact wording of the rule they're citing, even photos like we talked about. Anything that supports your case. Trust me, having that paper trail can be a lifesaver if things escalate.
It's like they always say, get it in writing.
Exactly. And once you've got all your ducks in a row, it might be worth having a calm but firm conversation with the HOA. Remind them of the Davis-Stirling Act, point out the inconsistencies, and explain why you believe their enforcement of the rule is unfair. You'd be surprised how often a little knowledge and respectful dialogue can go a long way.
Right. Like you said earlier, they might not even realize they're being arbitrary or selective.
Exactly. Sometimes it's just a matter of opening up the lines of communication. But of course, if that doesn't lead anywhere, or if the HOA is just being unreasonable, seeking legal advice from a lawyer specializing in HOA law is a smart next step.
And having all those detailed notes will be super helpful for any lawyer you might consult.
Absolutely. It shows you've done your homework and you're taking this seriously.
Awesome. So for our listener and anyone else out there feeling bullied by their HOA, remember, you have rights. The Davis-Stirling Act is a powerful tool, and knowing how to use it can make all the difference. This has been so insightful. Thank you so much for breaking it all down.
It was my pleasure. Now, one final thought to leave you with. The most effective HOAs are those that work collaboratively with homeowners. So don't be afraid to ask questions, participate in those meetings, even if they can be a little tedious, and be an advocate for fairness and transparency in your community.
Love that. Such a good reminder for all of us. Well, that's it for today's deep dive. Until next time, stay informed and stay curious.